Today's video answers a question that came in based on last week's video. Last week's video talked about the ramifications of missing the closing date and discussed the legal language, time is of the essence. In the scenario discussed in that video, the closing was delayed because the title company had not yet received a partial release of lien required for the closing. The closing was delayed 1 day. The follow-up question to that video had to do with what happens if the title company is at fault for not closing, meaning the title company is the one that's not ready to close, but all other parties are. It's a great question and one that warrants discussion. In my contract classes, I try always to explain that neither the title company nor the lender are parties to the contract. So failure of the title company or the lender to perform timely does not make the title company or lender in default of the contract. The only parties who are in default under the contract for failure of the title company or lender to perform timely are the seller and/or buyer. I remind you that when you tighten up timeframes for delivery of such things as financing approval, title commitments, surveys, etc., without checking with your service provider, you are putting your clients at risk of default under the contract. A careful reading of the contract shows who is responsible for such things as timely delivery of the survey, timely delivery of the commitment, and curative matters, buyer approval, property approval, etc. Although a title company and/or lender handles the particular process, it is either the seller or buyer who is responsible for it under the contract. And failure to perform is the seller or buyer's default for the respective process. That is why it is so critical for you who represent the buyer or seller to diligently and continuously follow up with your service provider. When I first got into the business and started closing transactions, my biggest frustration was not having control of much of the process. This is the same with licensees representing buyers and sellers. Being diligent with follow-up with your service provider is the only way to protect your clients. Clearly, it is incumbent upon you to find good service providers, but even with good service providers, it is your duty as representatives of the buyer or seller to make sure their obligations and responsibilities are met timely by following up with the service provider. Of course, you are very influential in making sure your service providers perform because if we don't, you spread the word. And we hope if we, the service provider, do perform, you also spread that word. Thank you for watching my videos. I hope they are of value and in turn you will give Allegiance Title the opportunity to showcase our service at the closing table. Thank you.